Yes, Chair, good to go.
Okay, thank you and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the Learning and Skills Scrutiny Committee. Do we have any apologies, Kath, please?
I've received apologies from Councillor Gwynfor Thomas.
Thank you.
And Lynette Lovell, Director, will be joining us as soon as possible.
Thank you. I imagine that also we will be joined by Councillor Sue McNicholas and Margaret as well. Hopefully they'll get into the meeting shortly. Any disclosures of interest, please? No. Okay, thank you. Declaration of party whip. Does anybody have any declarations to make, please? No. Okay, thank you. So we move on to the minutes of the meeting from the 15th of January 2024. Is everybody happy with those minutes, please? And if so, would somebody like to propose and second that? Glyn, thank you. We have a seconder. Thank you, Danny. And then we move on to the minutes of the 9th of February, please. Are we all happy with those? Yeah, thank you, Danny. Thank you, Carol. Okay, and then we just need to note, please, that the minutes have been published for the Joint Scrutiny Committee meeting in relation to the quarter three performance on the 28th of February 2024. So those are now available if anybody wants to look at them. So we move on then, please, to the Joint Leisure Working Group recommendations to the Cabinet report. This is item 5. I think, Councillor Gareth, are you going to take us through that?
I'm going to take you through it very quickly, Chair, if that's all right.
It is indeed, thank you.
And good afternoon all. Can I start by saying and thanking the members that joined me on this scrutiny working group. It wasn't what I would call a traditional scrutiny meeting. We were looking at the processes that are followed by officers in compiling a lot of the base information and not looking at any recommendations that they brought forward for the future configuration of leisure services. And I understand that will come out from the officers working group at a later date, and I would suggest would be scrutinized by all 3 scrutiny committees again, or perhaps we have a separate single meeting of the joint working group. And that is stated in the second paragraph of the report that you've got there. I think it's fair to say that we had a number of meetings. I think we had about 7 or 8 meetings between May 23 and January 24, and it took myself and other members a little while to get our heads around the fact that we were looking at the process and questioning and challenging the process rather than looking at any. And I think there was some expectations that we were looking for some outcomes around the future configuration of the leisure services. And the focus of the review was just on those leisure centres and swimming pools that are currently run by Freedom Leisure. So we didn't look at any other facilities within the authority, either still in the council's ownership or outside the council's ownership. We did have presentations from the sports centre manager in Crickall High School. They have a self-run leisure facilities under the school, which comprises some outdoor pitches, multi-use pitches, and also the indoor hall. And we also had some representation or presentation from Councillor Ratcliffe in his role as a trustee of the small swimming pool at A&Y, just for information for members. the focus of the review was to look at data, and the report comprises a lot of the information about the data we looked at. There are some issues that I think we would like to have seen some further information around the financial aspects of the Freedom Leisure contract and the performance, but it was also noted that obviously Freedom Leisure are in a contractual agreement with the authority, and there's some sensitivity around that. One of the key areas we looked at, and I think this would be a key area that would be challenged by members when we come on to the outcomes of any of the leisure proposals, was around the condition data on the leisure centres. And we chose to do an in-depth review of the data that the consultants had done around the Astragunlai Sports Centre and swimming pool. And the reason we chose Astragunlai was there was no member on the working group from that area. So we felt that would be the safest, that we have a review of a sports centre without anybody's local knowledge, etc. And the finding of that, we thought that the consultants had done a very, very thorough job. We had assurances that they'd use a consistent approach across all leisure centre sites. And one of the results of that was that the backlog repairs and maintenance, like all properties within the council portfolio, there's a significant backlog of repairs and maintenance, but a much bigger backlog or funding requirement required to bring the leisure centres and the pools up to a net zero position in terms of carbon. And I think the figure that we had quoted was 82 million to bring all the current stock up to a fit for purpose process. In terms of learning, there was a couple of issues. Sorry, the other thing I should have said, part of this process, Leisure Services did a customer satisfaction survey, and I think they had just over 3,000 responses, which for a survey within the council, I think that was a fantastic response. And the key feedback from that was that all leisure centres are greatly appreciated and supported by the local communities. In terms of the learning portfolio, we did ask, and a couple of the recommendations that we made surround schools' use of services. The one thing that we didn't have, weren't provided with, was a split of the payment made by the education services for the use of Freedom Leisure's facilities, split between swimming pools and dry facilities. And I think that will be something that we would expect the officers group to come forward with. It was also clear that based on information we were provided that in terms of the payments made by the County Council to Freedom Leisure, the vast majority of those payments are in relation to the school's use of the leisure centres to meet their curriculum needs, and that the subsidy from the County Council towards Freedom Leisure was quite a small figure in percentage terms of the overall cost. We were also made aware right at the end of our review of the proposal from school services to actually review the service level agreement or the contract with Freedom Leisure for the 24-25 year, and to reduce the amount of money from the school's contract for schools usage. And I'm sure officers are taking, and Councillor Peter taking that proposal forward. I think the main conclusion we had from our review, and please correct me others who were part of the review, was that we felt that the information we were provided was very comprehensive. We had a good cross-section of information, and to the stage we got the review to, there is little outstanding. You'll see Scrutiny's recommendation. These on the final page of the report, these have actually been considered by Cabinet at their meeting yesterday. and they add some actions. I think they accepted 2 of the actions, of the recommendations, partly accepted the third one. So the first recommendation was that when the final report comes to Cabinet, that Scrutiny should be provided with full financial performance and activity data. There is an awful lot of data already available on the council system, but it doesn't include the financial data, so you can actually do that comparison. The second recommendation was that we had a more detailed analysis of schools' usage of swimming pools, etc. And part of that action was that that should include the costs met by schools from either their delegated budgets or through parental contributions via the school fund for transport to the schools. I think there was a couple of members on the review group that weren't aware that primary schools are actually paying out of their own budget or from school fund for transporting children to swimming pools. I'm just reading the third one. I'm trying to get my head around it. Yeah, and that we gather the total cost of delivering the school curriculum leisure services. I've talked to the other 2 scrutiny committees who in the last week, and they're happy to take any questions, but they just accepted the report as it is, and there was no questions raised by cabinet members yesterday. Councillor Selby is also in the meeting today, so I'm not sure if you want to add anything, Councillor David.
All I'd add at this stage, Gareth, is to say that I think the scrutiny report, the work they did was very fair, very thorough, and as Gareth has pointed out, there is an awful lot of data there, and I have a feeling there's a lot of data that was not clearly understood before the process started, but at least with the work that's gone on, it is now, and what we've got is a universal view, I believe, that the process followed to get the data available to help the consideration of what next is fair, thorough, and was well researched.
Councillor Pete, you want to come in?
Yeah, just very quickly, I would echo David's comments. Thanks very much to the Joint Working Group. You give us the confidence that the data, that the report that will eventually come back to us upon is sound and has been thoroughly looked at, and that is a really, I think, effective use of scrutiny time. I noticed looking at today's agenda and comparing it with the Cabinet agenda, the report on this one doesn't have the Cabinet responses to it, but they are in the Cabinet agenda from yesterday, if anyone wants to look at that.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Well, I think, as Gareth points out, the paper has already been to Cabinet, so we can't really do anything other than accept it, I don't think. But if anybody does have any questions for Gareth or David or Pete, do by all means raise your hand. Aled.
Thanks, Chair. Relatively simple question, really. When will the leisure review be completed, and so staff and schools can plan their future? Thank you.
Relatively simple, but quite complex, Aled, in that we're talking about sustainable Paris now. The work will continue in terms of small pieces of outstanding work that's being worked on at the moment. But clearly, I'm not putting a date on a finish on the basis that other decisions that may or may not be taken around the Sustainable Paris Review will affect the work that this leisure review is conducting.
Thank you, David. But I'm guessing there's some budget savings predicated on this as well, and we've also got the Bro Hyddgain developments moving forward. So I wouldn't. I do fear that opportunities will be missed unless quick, thorough decisions are made very quickly.
There One other complication is the savings that school service are making in this particular element of the contract. So that work also is carrying on in terms of providing the data, so that decision can be made. It's not officially part of the leisure review, but it affects the future of the service going forward.
Yes, absolutely. The main user, the school service, as the reports of Gareth's report indicates. So I do have concerns about this progress on this. Just quick query to Councillor Roberts. Transports to leisure centres for swimming. Is the distance from leisure centre reflected within the school funding formula?
No, not at all.
I thought not. Thank you.
Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, just as an aside, Chair, I remember when I was an officer from the authority talking to a head teacher, most likely 25 years ago, who informed me that the council used to pay for the transport of children to the swimming pools, but removed it on a temporary basis 10 years prior to that meeting. So the parents and the schools have been funding their own transport for, I would say, 30 plus years.
Clearly, that will have an impact if the pool's closed. Equal equity of access to swimming is really important. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons added why we put it in as a recommendation, that we actually identified that figure. I'm a governor of a small 2-class primary school. They only swim one term of a year, which is a current term, and they are charging parents £5.50 a week per child for the transport, and they're paying £180 a week. £180 per return journey for that transport, and that is a distance of about 8 miles to and from the leisure centre.
Thank you, Gareth. Georgie, you wanted to come in?
Talking about Chair, just to say really that in Wales it is not compulsory that children learn to swim. As an LA, we feel it is an essential life skill, and we've spoken to head teachers about that. And as part of the review, we've tried to determine an amount of swimming time with the leisure team around that. But therefore, the autonomy sits with individual schools regarding planning for swimming in their curriculum and the travel to and from that. So without closing leisure centres right this second, we've got some schools that are right by swimming pools and can walk to them. And we have some that have to still access transport to get there anyway. So I think as part of this as well, we've tried to come up with ideas of specific hours of swimming time that each child could or should be entitled to. But I have to really reiterate, it's not statutory. And other LAs have chose to not consider swimming in schools as something that they will fund moving forward. So from our perspective, we have decided it is a priority for us, and we are working with the leisure team on this because it is a life-saving skill that we believe all children should have access to as a service.
Is it statutory in England, Georgie?
Yes, I think it is, but it isn't here.
Okay, thank you. I know I'm lucky, or we're lucky, the primary school where I'm a governor, the community council pay for the bus because they felt it was really important that living by a river, the children should all learn to swim. So, okay, thank you. Any other comments? Anybody else want to raise anything? No? Okay, lovely, thank you. In which case we move on to item 6, which is a discussion in relation to school visits and deep dive work. Now, I know some members of the committee have expressed a desire to get out and visit some schools rather than just talk about them from a distance. But there's also possibly some deep dive work that needs to be done. Does anybody have any comments on that? Any thoughts, please? Nothing?
Chair, I was half waiting for somebody else, but I'm quite keen to do something on the PIUs since there's significant savings within the budget going forward over the next couple of years, to understand the impact on the provision provided. There's talk of potentially working closer with schools or having on school sites as an alternative, but it's really important that we get a clear plan before any changes are implemented. So I'd quite appreciate a closer look at that. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. Anybody else want to raise anything particular at this moment? Bryn?
Fydd ar ni siarad unwaith, ydy, mae Ellis yma, ie. Fydd ar ni crybwyll rhywdro i ymweld ag ysgolion sydd yn darparu addysg trochi. Ond dwi'n gwybod os da ni'n edrych ar yr bwyllgor cyfan i fynd yn un, neu ni'n sôn jyst am yr y bwyllgor trochi yma fyny chi. Does na nyn llyn agos iawn at ni. Wel, mae'n un pen o bywys neu pen arall o bywys, so mae'n... Ydy bobl dal eisiau gwneud hynny neu bydde?
Diolch, Bryn. I mean, I think one of the things that members had suggested was that those of us who from the north don't get a chance to have an understanding of some of the schools in the south and vice versa. So inevitably that will involve some travelling, and it's something we need to look at, how we actually manage it in practice, I think. Ale, did you want to come back in again?
I was just going to support Bryn in his call. Maybe it's a working group would be better placed to, and any other interested parties to join the working group in that visit. Perhaps a working group could drive that forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Nothing else in particular. I think perhaps it's something that we need to think about and perhaps come back to the committee with some proposals. Do officers have anything in particular that they think it would be beneficial for the committee to look at in more detail? So that's always an interesting aspect.
I think, Councillor Lucy, I think it would be important for them to see conditions of some of our buildings. We are all finding ourselves in a challenging financial situation, and we have the transformation agenda, and I think they do need to see in some of the learning environments that our children are learning in now and how varied it is, particularly next to a new build. Which some children are experiencing and benefiting from, and some aren't. And I think it'd be really good for Scrutiny members to see it, in the daylight of what teachers are managing and the pressure it's putting on budgets as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Georgie. And I'm thinking of perhaps those who've not had any connections with the through school, that might be beneficial as well, to have a look at the work of the through school. Eirig.
Comment really on the trochi provision there. I think it would probably be very useful for the subcommittee to actually get out and see that, because part of their role would be reporting back to the scrutiny committee themselves. So happily to support that and the subcommittee in that work.
Okay, thank you. And I know Margaret's not managed to join the meeting today, but she was keen that we looked into sort of a preschool provision. That will perhaps be more of a deep dive than a visit opportunity, I think, but that was something that she was keen to look at.
Yeah. Another element as well that's a big national agenda is the community schools agenda, and what a community school looks like within its community and the role it plays. And we've employed family liaison officers with our grant to support our community schools agenda, and that work is part of the Welsh Government National Review, and we're being used as a case study to share the good progress we've made with our community schools. So I think it might be a good experience as well to go and see a community school and a non-community school at the moment and see the difference between what they do. But we've also got difference within the community schools as well.
Okay, thank you, Georgie. Alan, were you waiting to come back in?
Yes, a little bit. To support Georgie on what she's saying around the new builds. And we see all through schools built across the border, designed to suit all through school. You know, there's some in or just over the border in Carmarthen, and it shows. Well, I hope it would show what's possible and what can be designed. The problems can be designed out to support a huge different age groups, and to give assurance as well about the safety and well-being of children across the age range. And so I'd support Georgie in that as well. But I just wanted to, we really need to understand the impact of tight budgets on the options that are available to our students going forward. Clearly, not the all the additional costs have not been covered by the additional money going into the schools delegated, and the only way of getting schools to fit the budget is to reduce staff numbers and the impact of that on the curriculum. So I'd really like it perhaps a working group or offline session of this, so we can have a really good understanding of the impact.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ahmed. And it'd be interesting to see how that fits with I think it's item 8 on the agenda coming up, the offer for Key Stage 4.
Yeah, exactly. It's all tied together, doesn't it?
Yeah. Thank you. Pete.
Yeah, if you're looking for ideas for working groups, one that might be an interesting one to look at is the success of multi-sited schools, the problems that they face, the challenges. Looking at the 2 that we've got, if we were to be looking at establishing more, are there lessons that we can learn from those? And I think Scrutiny would be really well placed to look at how those 2 schools, 4 sites, have developed in the 4, 5, 6 years. So, well, one of them longer since they were established, to see what we can learn from that, and possibly look elsewhere as well to see whether there are other examples where we can learn from outside of Powys.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Bryn, you were next.
Yeah, diolch, Gadeirydd. Dwi'n meddwl bod ychydig dros flwyddyn erbyn hyn, pan glywson ni am bod yna apwyntiad wedi wneud yn Powys i hyrwyddo addysg cerddorol offerynnol yn y sir. A dwi'n wedi clywed dim byd yn digwydd fan hyn y gogledd yma ar y llinellau hynny. Dwi'n yn gwybod oes yna weithgaredd ac oes yna llwyddiannau wedi dod o'r prosiect hwnnw. Oedd o'n swnio'n eitha cyffroes pan gaeth o'i gyflwyno i ni, ond dwi'n wedi clywed o ddim canlyniadau ohono fo. Dwi'n gwybod bod yna prosiect yn digwydd yn Ceredigion, ond dwi'n gwybod os yw ar draws y sir neu jyst digwydd bod mewn un ysgol ddos i ar ei traws. Fyswn i'n licio clywed mwy am hynny.
Perhaps that's something we could put on the agenda for a future meeting, Bryn, rather than a visit or a specific sort of deep dive.
Yeah.
I suspect it's something we'd all like a bit of a quick update on.
Councillor Lucy, can I just
Thank
come
you for
in there?
raising
Because
that. Georgie,
Oh.
back to you. Oh,
Sorry.
you're on mute, Georgie.
Sorry, can I come in on the music? Because he oversees the
Yeah.
music.
Sorry, just to oversee on that, yeah. Lindsay McCrowan, who is our lead for strategic our strategic lead, sorry, for music and expressive arts, be happy to come back and share with you what they've been doing over the last year, how she's been working across the county and the different groups that she's been working with as well. You know, she's presented to Welsh Government and to other local authorities as well. So, you know, there has been significant progress in what we've been able to achieve over the last year. I'm sure she'd love to come back and share that one with you as well. So if you'd like to invite her back, I'm sure she'd be happy to come and share that one with you.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Irig. Was there anything else, Georgie, or was it just to bring Irig in?
Just oh, hang on, can you hear me? Yeah, just to say as well, in response to Councillor Allen's point about the offer, Chris is obviously here today to talk about the Key Stage 4 offer. It is about obviously potentially impact on funding, but also the offer meeting the demand and the customer's need. And that's something that Chris is going to talk about in a bit, about what our young people in Powys want and need as well. We need to consider that when we think about the offer of post 14 moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Georgie. Councillor David.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think we need to look as to whether the current funding formula is fair across all schools and is providing, you know, especially sufficient for ALN students as well. I'm really concerned that some schools coming up with their budgets this year are really, really struggling, and it could have an adverse effect on certainly ALN students. So I think we need to look across the board, really.
Thank you, David. Okay, lovely. Yep, go on.
Sorry, Councillor Lucy, can I just come in response to that? Because we've just changed the formula in line. We just went through all the consultation around the ALN and changes to the formula to make sure that less was staying centrally. So we've just done that, Councillor David, and it came through scrutiny and cabinet regarding changes to the formula for deprivation and ALN. The only thing
I'm quite aware of that, Chair, but it is really having an adverse effect on certain size schools, and that is why I'm bringing it back. It might have gone through scrutiny, it might have gone through all the channels, but there are certainly major problems with it. And we can't let it go, because schools coming up for an SN inspection and all the rest of it, you know, could suffer as a result of this. So the fact it is being renewed and this is a new formula doesn't mean to say it's right. It doesn't mean to say it hasn't gone through scrutiny, it's right. But something needs to be looked at to ensure that it's fair across the board.
Okay, thank you, David. Okay, lovely. I think we then need to move on to item 7, please, which is progression and learning. I don't know whether Councillor Peter, you wanting to introduce this item?
No, I'm quite happy to let Chris come straight in and present. He's got a presentation for you. It's a technical presentation rather than a political one, so all I will do is say, Chris, have at it.
This is Cressy's presentation, I think, Pete.
Oh, is it? Sorry.
I will be soon, though.
I think Cressy and Irig.
Sorry. There's several presentations today, in which case, Cressy, have at it.
I think Cressy and Irig, is it between you?
Yes, it is. Yeah, we've created the report outlining where the schools were at the end of the last academic year. The reason why it's coming now is you have to have verified data in terms of the outcomes, especially at Key Stage 4, which doesn't come to us until after Christmas, really. So hence why we're talking about schools last year and the outcomes at that point. We've circulated the report, and rather than taking everybody through it, we'd be quite happy for anybody to ask questions about it, rather than reiterating what has already been presented in the report, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Sounds like a sensible use of time. So sorry, I'm just scrolling down, trying to get the report, and every time I get there, it goes back to the top of the page. Bear with me a moment. In the meantime, does anybody have any questions that they want to raise or any comments?
Or did they want to take it in the two sections? Section 2 is all about the Eston inspections from last year. If anybody wanted to ask anything about that section, and then we could go then on to section 3 after that, if that would help.
Yep, that sounds a good way forward. So any questions on the Eston inspections? Has everybody had a chance to look at the report? It was interesting to me, Eirik, that the main thing that came up was the teaching.
Yes. Yeah, it's significant, wasn't it? 13 out of the 27 recommendations that we had across all of our schools last year highlighted teaching as needing to be improved.
Yeah.
What we've done as a result of that was during the autumn term, because obviously this was only a snapshot of the 9 schools that were inspected. Well, what we did during our autumn term visits is we focused on teaching in every school. So we had specific questions which we went into them. We wanted to see what evidence the schools had of the quality of teaching there. And then we've been able to put in support then into those schools that needed that going forward. So in most of the schools that we worked with over the autumn term, they were able to show us that the quality teaching is at least good in their schools. In the very few schools then that were saying that there was some inconsistencies in teaching. Most of those schools were able to have identified where the inconsistencies were and had support processes in place to actually address those. And there were very, very few where teaching hadn't been analysed or analysed fully. We've put more support in there in terms of our school improvement advisor support going into those schools, so those schools can get an accurate picture of where their teaching is at that time. So although it hasn't addressed all of those issues yet, we're in a much stronger position as to where our schools would be in terms of teaching. And that's as a result of what's come back from the inspections last year.
Is it partly because of changes in the way the inspections are done, Eirik? I mean, were they picking up teaching in a way that they might not have done in the past? Would they have been concentrating more on results in the past? I don't know. It's just a question.
No, it's a hard one because we actually see the national picture as well from Eston. It wasn't a national issue that teaching came out as inconsistent. That was mainly more around self-evaluation processes, whereas in Powys that wasn't being picked up as one of our significant areas. It may have been, down to the schools that were chosen that last year. It may have just been that inconsistency that way, but what we made sure now is we're going out to ensure all schools are focusing on teaching, and that then should lead on to the standards, because standards need to be high as well. So
yeah,
making sure that we ensuring that the schools are challenging themselves to ensure that the quality of teaching is high.
Okay, thank you. Bryn.
Ie, diolch. Wel, mae Eirik di gwneud y pwynt ys ni frawddeg olaf am mwy na lai. Os di'r dysgu yn iawn, dyle bod y safonau yn mynd fyny'n automatic mewn ffordd. Now, y cwestiwn sgen i, mae yna 5 ardal arolwg inspection area, os liciwch chi.
Yeah.
Ydyn nhw gyd yn cael yr un pwyslais? I mean, fos ni wedi dweud, dyle bod 80-90% o ymdrech ysgolion yn mynd mewn i'r dysgu. A mae pethau eraill, fel care support, leadership, well-being, holl bwysig, cytuno, ond maen nhw'n ar yr ymylon, os liciwch chi, i bwrpas yr ysgol. Oes na ryw awgrym os di heina'n fwy llwyddiannus na'r dysgu bod yna digon o staff ar gyfer yr agweddau hynny o'r gwaith ysgol, ond ddim digon o staff ar gyfer y dysgu yn y dosbarth. Hynny yw, os na dipyn bach o ysnawgrym fan'na bod ysgolion yn rhoi cael digon o bwyslais ar y pethau ymylol, ond ddim digon o bwyslais ar y craidd bodolaeth, rheswm bodolaeth ysgolion.
Yn y llygaid estyn, mae'r gyd o'r inspection areas yn gyfartal. So, dydyn nhw ddim yn gwneud wahaniaeth rhwng y 5. Ond yn ysgolion, ni wedi mynd trwyddo Covid, mae nhw wedi ffocysu ar lles, a ni'n gwybod hynny. Mae rhaid i nhw, roedd rhaid i nhw, a mae nhw'n cadw fynd gyda hyn hefyd, achos mae rhaid i'r lles y plant bod yn y lle gywir os mae nhw'n mynd i ddysgu yn yr ysgolion. Ydy'r honna'r reswm mae'r addysgu ddim yn y pell, yn y lle ni eisiau? Ni ddim yn sicr, achos ni'n gallu weld mae dysgu da dros yr ysgolion, dros Powys. Ni'n gallu weld hyn, ni wedi bod mewn a gweithio gyda'r ysgolion, ond roedd rhaid i ni mynd nôl i'r ysgolion i weld ble ydyn ni, pam, a beth yw'r reswm, a oedd un o'r problemau oedd estyn wedi pigo lan. Mae'r plant yn neud yn dda, ond ydy'r her yna hefyd i gwneud yn siŵr bod nhw'n gwthio nhw ymlaen llawer. A dyna beth ni'n gofyn nawr i'r ysgolion hefyd. Ydyn nhw'n herio nhw a herio'r athrawon i gwneud yn siŵr bod nhw yn gwthio'r plant ymlaen a maen nhw'n gwneud yn dda iawn. Dim yn dda, ond dda iawn.
Iawn. Oce, diolch.
Thank you, Arig. Aled, your turn.
Thanks, Lucy. There's same problem as you. It appears behind another screen. So, there's a lot of
Aled, sorry. Can you just go back to the beginning, because when we swap from interpretation to no interpretation, we seem to lose the first sentence.
To be honest, you didn't lose anything at all.
Okay.
I was still trying to find the correct page on the PowerPoint. Apologies. There's a lot of data in this here now about options and the availability, but it doesn't sort of indicate the across various schools really. It looks at the Powys sort set of information really, and the quality of options across the schools. That's one of my big concerns. It doesn't really show that.
Are you looking at the PowerPoint, Aled?
Yeah.
That's the next agenda item.
Oh, apologies. I thought that was part of the post-40 provision stuff. Okay.
We're on the report from Arig and Cressy on progression and learning. Sorry.
Oh, apologies. Too many phone calls. Okay, forget me for a moment.
That's all right. Well, I mean, we've got it starts off with the results of the inspection report and then moves on to look at qualifications. Glyn, you've got a question.
Yeah, I've got questions about the qualifications section of this report. If we're okay to move on, Chair.
Yeah, that's. I was just going to ask. So I'll perhaps do it first.
I'll wait.
Just about leadership. Is that again? Is that schools where there's not permanent leadership, Arig?
No, it's across all types of schools there. So yeah, it wasn't specific about any acting or new leadership there. It was more about the quality of leadership.
Okay.
Because again, it doesn't matter whether you've been there for a short period of time, a long period of time. It's what is the impact of leadership inside the school? Do they understand their school well? Do they understand the strengths of their school? If there are areas to improve, what are the improvement plans in place? Are those realistic? So those are the kind of things that you're just picking up on there, was that schools haven't quite been specific enough. Sometimes over generous in some of their their judgments as well. So again, that's something that we're working on with those, but it's on a much less intensive situation than we were with the teaching, because obviously teaching came up in a lot of the inspection outcomes last year. But it is something we work with our schools on. In fact, we did training with our senior leaders this morning, about yesterday and this morning, on improving self-evaluation, ensuring there's that real clear, robust and honest evaluation of where you are. Because that's the only way you're going to help move your school forward, is if you realise what needs to improve, and then you can do that. It doesn't need anybody else to tell you then. You're doing that, you're self-improving. That's so important in schools.
Okay, diolch, Oric. Aled, did you want to come back on the inspections section?
Just on the data analysis, it compares us to the All Wales average, doesn't it?
Yeah, on data. Okay, let Glyn come in first then, because Glyn was
Okay.
waiting to come in on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on that table actually, Chair. Thank you very much. That's very kind. 3.10. So I'm just looking at the literacy and numeracy point score. I just wondered. So obviously our local authority average and the Wales average are closer in terms of the scoring compared than the EFSM local authority average and the All Wales EFSM score. So I'm just wondering whether there's an explanation as to why we've got a bigger disparity in the EFSM, as in we're doing better than All Wales, but that it's kind of closer in the comparing the local authority average and the All Wales average.
Yes, I'll come in there. I mean, I think first of all, I'd say that in terms of scores, these are all very close indeed. So we're talking quite marginal differences in the big scheme of things. And that this is also to be aware of is that compared to All Wales, Powis's number of FSM pupils is lower. So we have to take into account the context there when we're considering those aspects.
Thank you, Cressy. Aled, do come in now.
Thanks, Lucy. When comparing
We're not
schools,
hearing you again, Aled.
when comparing schools with different schools, are you okay now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
There's you almost are matched up, so you're comparing like with like, rather than a general average. Do they do the same sort of thing with the local authorities? So you're comparing the results and the outcomes for Powys with other similar local authorities?
It's something which we could probably pull out of the data. So all of this data is in the public domain and available on My Local School. So we don't get given the data about other local authorities directly, but you could go and have a look at schools in other local authorities and have a look at how they're doing in comparison. What schools are given in order to compare is they're given data from similar schools. So every school receives what's called the All Wales Poor Data Packs. And in that, they're placed into a family of similar schools, and they are told the family average, and therefore they can benchmark themselves against that to see how well they're doing compared to similar schools in similar contexts.
But do you further do a little bit of further analysis within Powys now comparing those schools?
I certainly didn't get the beginning of that again, Aled. I don't know whether everybody else is or not.
Okay.
No.
Not sure what I'm doing, right? Sorry, Cressy. I was just wondering whether you do more work on that. So looking at our schools, how they compare to the families, you know, and bringing all that data together. I know you can probably go on various other websites, but do you do legwork in that? So you're comparing our schools with similar schools rather than that catch-all of the All Wales average?
Yeah, so we only have quite a high level overview of that. You can see that in point 3.13. On average, in the CAP 9 score, Powys were 3.9 points behind similar schools. So that's about the equivalent of half a grade across all of the 9 qualifications. So not half a grade per qualification, but half a grade across the 9 qualifications. But we don't have access to more detailed information than that.
Okay, thanks. And the question that follows is how Powys going to address this gap?
So we're addressing this as part of the secondary strategy, with a strong focus on improving teaching and learning in schools, on improving the curriculum offer, and improving the way in which schools support learners to make the best progress that they can through their journeys, and certainly aspiring to be in line with other similar schools is a focus for us through that work.
And I don't know how much idea, but what sort of timescales are you looking at to close that gap?
So again, that's ongoing and ongoing work. The secondary strategy is written at the moment to span a period of 3 years, and we would like to see significant improvements during that time.
Thanks, Cressy.
Diolch, Cressy. Councillor Bryn.
Okay. Diolch. Dwi dim bach yn ofnus yn gofyn y cwestiwn yma, achos mae'n dangos fy anealltwriaeth yma. Na i dderbyn bod rhif mawr yn peth da a rhif isel yn peth ddrwg. Oes na, a dwi wedi trio deall yr esboniad sydd rhwng y 2 tabl, ond dy ddim yn hollol eglur i fi eto. O'n i'n gweld bod yna sgôr yn cael ei roi ar gyfer pob gradd. Ydy hwnna'n, dyna'r rhif sy'n cael ei osod ar gyfer pob A-seren sy'n cael ei ennill, neu hwnna ydy'r rhyw fath o drothwy i gael A-seren ac yn y blaen? A sut mae, ys bosib cael jyst rhyw esboniad sydyn iawn o sut mae'r CAP 9 sgôr yn dod oddi wrth sgorau'r graddau yn y tabl cyntaf. Just dipyn bach mwy o helpu fi ddeall beth sy'n digwydd yma.
Yes, of course. So as you can see from the table in point 3.6 there, every GCSE grade then equates to a score. I could have included, and if anybody would like some additional information around how qualifications that are not awarded with grades work with scores, I could provide that information. But as we all generally understand, A star to G grades, that's what I've included here. So each qualification, each grade gets given a score. And if we just look at the literacy points and the numeracy points, for example, the local authority average being 41 for literacy means that on average, our learners gain just over a grade C across the board. And with numeracy, it's just under a grade C. Okay, with the CAP 9 score, they take their best 9 grades from across the qualifying qualifications. So most qualifications count towards the CAP 9, but there are qualifications available that don't. And it does include English and maths and science, or Welsh, depending on the medium of the school that learners are in. And they take the best 9 grades, as I said, and that contributes to the CAP 9 score.
So I can see that 9 times 41 would be 369 actually. So it's the literacy is a good indicator of how they perform. It's a better indicator of how they perform across the subjects than numeracy in that respect. They're slightly off the mark in numeracy, but literacy is bang on the average. Is that Is that a reasonable interpretation of the top line anyway? In Powys?
It would appear so at this point in time. However, I wouldn't say that that was a reliable way of considering it in general. That could vary year on year.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, diolch yn fawr. That did help. Diolch, Cressy.
thanks, Cressy. Georgie, sorry, I think I overlooked your hand.
No worries, Jacob. I just wanted to sort of pick up on a couple of the points regarding the secondary school improvement strategy and the role of the SIA. So it's one of the things that we've sort of really focused on in the last year. So the SIAs are aware of the family data for their schools and sit with their senior leaders to look at that. We don't collate that and analyze that internally as a team, but that is one of the roles of the SIA. One of the biggest things we did prioritize in last year in line with this report was self-evaluation and being able to really accurately reflect where you are as a school. And we've seen significant improvements in that in the first year of the revising the strategy, which is now leading to the improvements in teaching and learning. And that's begun to come through in some of the inspections. I think the other element for me is that the data is very different now, and maybe it would be beneficial for scrutiny members to have a data session regarding the different types of data and what we get to use and analyze, because you can have a school that has a very, very good CAP9, but it doesn't necessarily mean those qualifications are the qualifications that children need for the next steps of life. And in our previous role, we certainly saw elements like that happening. So I think it's really important that scrutiny members understand the CAP9 and what that means and how that can be determined, particularly as a lot of you are our governors as well. The other thing that we've invested in at Key Stage 5 and are considering for Key Stage 4 is ALPS data. And again, ALPS data is far more informative than a CAP9 figure when you're looking at value added. So it isn't just about hitting the average compared to other LAs, it's about the value we add to our children and how much we take them not only to their potential, but above their potential. So that's another element of data I think it'd be really beneficial for scrutiny members to be sort of trained in and understand and see that, because we have that data on an individual perspective by school, but also as a collective, and we can talk that through with you, obviously not in a public session, but we could do that training with scrutiny members.
Thank you for that offer, Georgie. Kath, if you could make a note of that, please, for a future session, then I'm sure that would be welcome. I think it's perhaps something that we've done sometime in the past, so it'd be good to bring it up to date. Thank you. Any other comments on this paper? No? Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Cressy and Eirik. That was helpful, a helpful update. Diolch. So we then move on to the PowerPoint presentation, I believe. Who's going to take us through that, please?
That'll be me.
Chris, sorry, I should have known that.
Not a problem. Am I good to share my screen?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Is that coming through?
Not yet.
Okay.
Oh, it's coming through now, Chris.
Chair.
Yes, Bryn.
Are we having questions after the presentation or during the presentation? Or...
Good question. Chris, what would you prefer?
I'm easy. If people would like, if I've already heard one or two of the questions in advance, I think, which were directed towards Cressy and Eirik. But yeah, of course, if you have some questions you'd like to raise before, I'm more than happy to attempt to answer them now.
Okay, all right. We'll perhaps take them as we go through then.
Yeah. Duh.
Thanks for the question, Bryn. Sorry, Chris, back to you.
Thank you, Diolch. So yeah, many thanks for inviting me along to this today. It is just to give a high-level overview of the report I put together through the autumn term and this spring. I'll be brief because I can tell obviously a lot of you have thankfully had a good look at it and have got questions ready to go. So again, happy to take questions at any point. So please just let me know. So as an overview, you can see I tried to visit pretty much every school. There was one or two occasions due to a number of reasons which I couldn't get to every single one, but I managed to really get around and meet SLT members. The purpose of the report was to get a real clear overview of the qualifications on offer in the schools. I got asked quite regularly when I started in the post around what do we offer, what do numbers look like, what does Welsh medium look like, and we didn't have that data readily available. And it was a really useful activity, and whilst doing that, obviously I was able to meet with learners in every centre and ask them questions regarding their careers option choices and the pathways which they're available to them and what they would like to see improve. So it was a really useful process to go through, and the aim is to highlight some strengths which we have in provision, but also to identify areas which need improvement. A key part of it was also to keep an eye on the 14 to 16 reform of the qualifications in Wales. There's rather a large amount of change coming our way, and it's just having an eye on the future and the vision of what Careers Wales and the Welsh Government have in mind for what careers in Wales look like, and it's to ensure that we're ready for that process when it arrives. So,
Chris, can I just interrupt there? How long have you been aware of those changes?
The reforms have gone through. They've been going through a consultation for quite a while. The ones which are coming soonest are the Made for Wales GCSEs, which we are more ready for because they are being taught from September 25 onwards, and then 26 and 27 is a few other great qualifications GCSEs coming in. But the GCSE, they've started with the GCSEs, and then these other reforms, and now it's what's coming next after that. But the decision report was only produced in January for this. So this feeds a lot from that decisions report, which I'm more than happy to share the full report, which you can get, but this has got a condensed version in my PowerPoint for you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Chris.
No problem. So starting with the obvious strengths, which we know, we probably guess that we're pretty strong at in Powys, is the traditional GCSE qualification route, which is and again, in answer to the question from Councillor Aled, I do have the list of schools where these are being delivered available, but again, I think it's got to go through. There's a process before I can maybe share that in terms of naming schools and where these qualifications are happening. No surprise really in the overview of the options students are opting for here. This actually ties in really well with how the post-16 offer looks in terms of uptake and on courses. We have a lot of students who go for physical education, history and geography, very popular subjects in the county. You can see it. There's a wide range on offer there, with really strong numbers in the 700s at the top end, and then you've got some Mandarin down the bottom with some very small numbers. But there's it's fantastic that is an option and available in county. But I will touch on equity later on. There is that there is a theme throughout this, which I'm sure you might have the same thoughts around. How available are some of these subjects. Is there a question you'd like me to take at this point?
Bryn, you've got a question.
Yeah, oes, diolch. Wel, un cwestiwn amlwg ydy pan bod llenyddiaeth Gymraeg yno ar y rhestr hon, dydy llenyddiaeth Saesneg ddim ar y rhestr. Mae i rhai sydd yn cyfrwng Cymraeg, mae llenyddiaeth Cymraeg yn cyfri yr un fath yma llenyddiaeth Saesneg am yn orfodol yn hynny o beth, ac hefyd pam bod ni dim ond yn dangos tygau orfodol. Dwi'n gwybod bod 4 pwnc craidd o'n nhw'n galw nhw, Cymraeg, Saesneg, Maths a Gwyddoniaeth. Mae pawb yn gorfod gwneud rhyw fath ohono fo, ond fysa fo'n ddiddorol gamma dim ond rhyw 4 llinell arall ar y tabl fysa hyn yn golygu. Fysa fo'n diddorol gweld sut mae'r niferoedd yn cymharu efo niferoedd ar gyfer y pynciau dewis. So dyna'r 2 gwestiwn. Un, pam bod Gymraeg yn cael ei drin yn wahanol i'r Saesneg yn hynny o beth, a pam da ni ddim yn dangos pob tygau.
Diolch, Bryn. The short answer is Welsh literature. It is an option even in the Welsh medium settings. So that's where it was quite it was a difficult one to untangle when I received all this data from schools with Welsh medium streams and or English only, or with dual stream, and I consulted with my colleagues in the West, with Beth and Price, on this as well, in terms of what's the best way to sort of present this. But I'm more than happy to give you the full set of data, Bryn, if you'd like to have that, because I do have the numbers for all of these courses. It was just, again, it was no intention of causing any sort of offence or anything. It was just purely trying to fit in on a PowerPoint slide is one, but the Welsh literature, you are right. It's an interesting point in terms of it. In some schools, it should be a compulsory, deemed as a compulsory, not an option. But in this setting, with the 97 learners, it was included in this list here. But I'm happy to do that. And can you remind me of the second part of the question? Sorry.
Yeah, pam ddim dangos pob tygau sy'n cael ei dysgu i'r plant. Yn amlwg fysa'r niferoedd yn llawer uwch ar gyfer math, Saesneg, Cymraeg ag gwyddoniaeth. Ond dydy o ddim wastad. Dwi'm yn siŵr beth i sefyllfa rwan, achos mi roedd yna dewis oedd gwyddoniaeth sengl ar wahân yn dewis, neu pawb yn gorfod gwneud gwyddoniaeth dwbl ni mewn rhai ysgolion, dim ond gwyddoniaeth sengl. Dwi'm yn siŵr peth ydi symud ymlaen o'r agwedd yn erbyn hyn, ond fysa fo'n, ac hefyd fysa'n gwneud o'n haws i ni deall arwyddocad y ffigurau yma, os da ni'n gweld be di'r niferoedd cyfan sy'n sefyll tygau, a da ni'n gallu gweld pa fraction sy'n cymryd pob opsiwn wedyn. Dyna'r ail ran.
No problem. Yeah, I have all that data, so I am happy to share that. It was a matter of condensing it onto a PowerPoint slide, but it is really interesting, and it does. Some further points can be raised from that. Georgie, did you want to come in at that point?
Yes, please, Chris. One of the things here we're talking about with the offer, Councillor Bryn, is the curriculum offer of options, the core of the core. I appreciate the triple could potentially be in this table, triple science, but every child has to sit maths, English or Welsh, depending on their first language, and science to some degree. So what we wanted, we've done a bit here on GCSEs, but also vocational as well. This is the additional offer, if you like. This is what the children get to pick. They don't get to pick whether they can do the maths and the English or the Welsh, or the science, as we all know. So we've tried to concentrate here on the option of the offer and what's within the offer. But the triple science could be included. We could include that as well here. But all of the children, unless they're disapplied, which is very, very few, have to sit the core, don't they?
Yeah. Wel, efallai fysa jyst yn help cael un rhif yn dweud faint o blant sydd yn sefyll tygau y flwyddyn hon, wrach,
The data is available, so I can do that.
Diolch.
So just moving on to the other part of the options process, we've got the other the other qualifications here. They're not necessarily all vocational, but they are mainly vocational subjects on offer. But the reason I didn't call them vocational is you've got things like personal finance, the ASDAN COPE awards, and the Agorid awards. They're not necessarily linked to a vocation in the technical sense, but these are the qualifications other than GCSEs. And I mean, the main point to draw from there is obviously there's not as many being on offer. We do have an issue as well in terms of access with the college provision, which I'll go on to in the next slide as well. So there are some schools which maybe don't offer much of the alternative qualifications to GCSEs, but they might have a bit of a stronger relationship with the college where they're able to access that provision. And again, I'm clear throughout the report that that this is not to say that if a school isn't on the list, it's maybe not just necessarily down to a choice. It might be down to having, the staff with the relevant expertise or the physical resources to deliver something like the agriculture award, which we know is an incredibly, important qualification to the county, but we actually struggle to get that access to that qualification in all areas, which is what we want. And again, I know someone, I can't remember at this point, but someone has made the point earlier today around the costing and the investment. At the moment with school budgets as they are, it is challenging, but this is the current state of play. At least we know now what the student numbers look like and what pathways look like across the county. So it was a really useful exercise for myself, and it's actually hopefully going to inform us moving forward, which is the main point of all of this. This is now the connection to the colleges. So we have an agreement with the MPTC Newtown and Brecon, and these are the courses which currently run at those settings. So we've got the hair and beauty, the agriculture, public services, and then in the south you have those similar again, but with the motor vehicle and business. You've got the schools who access those courses, and again, interestingly, you'll have some schools in the south, but heading up to Newtown for the agri, because it's not available in the south there. You've got schools in the centre accessing in both. So it was just an interesting exercise to go through, because obviously the invoices for this come to out of the 14 to 19 budget, and prior to starting in the role, these invoices were coming in, and I didn't really know who was going where. It was an interesting thing to go through, but to actually get this now, it was really useful for me to see, well, actually where is the demand. The key question for me was around the equitability of this, and obviously speaking to senior leaders. Some schools weren't even aware this was an option, and obviously there is a logistical issue. If you are out, if you're over an hour from Newtown, is that feasible to get your learners there and back again on a Tuesday or a Thursday? So I'm aware there's obviously logistical issues around this, but in terms of having access to quality vocational provision, I do think it's a valid point to raise. And again, I'll go over in a bit more detail, but you've probably already seen in the slides that the new vocational pathways that the Welsh Government and Qualifications Wales are, their vision for qualifications in Wales is to ensure that vocational is put on a level playing field with the GCSE pathway, and that links with the economy, that links with the demand of what employers are looking for. So it is vitally important that we do, we need to work with our colleagues in the college settings to deliver the expertise on things like motor vehicle and hair and beauty when schools don't have access to that. So I just wanted to bring that to make that nice and clear that it costs around £270,000 per year. The transport is provided, but there are students accessing this, which is fantastic. It's a question of how do we expand this so that no learner is at a disadvantage based on their locality in the county. Was there a question there? I think Councillor Bryn.
Dim ond bod ni'n methu darllen beth ydy'r cyrsiau yn y colofn cynta. Oes modd cael wybodaeth yna?
Is it there? Sorry.
Diolch.
Sorry, okay. The animation didn't. Apologies on what I sent over. That probably blocked that box.
Yeah.
Okay. Just conscious of time. So moving forward, then looking in more specifically at the provision for the vulnerable groups. Now, this came about mainly from starting in April in my role. Quite often, I was finding that there were questions being sent my way in regards to vulnerable groups of learners, and a question around, the needs, are their needs being met through the curriculum design at certain school or areas, and there was some issues around that. So going out to the schools and actually asking them specifically what provision is in place for And again, you know, I asked them on pretty much all the types of groups of learners which could be in their cohorts. It was a really useful activity to go through. You know, we know that 19% of the mainstream are approximately have an additional learning need. There's again around 19% specifically of year 10 and 11 who are in receipt of free school meals. And then we've got a small amount, but still it's important not to forget these small proportions, but we have our 1% which are just are looked after children, a 5.2 of English as an additional language. And there's around 19 students. And again, the data on this is a bit more difficult to pin down because of the age ranges, and some of the information it's taken a while to come to me. But we do have around 19 unaccompanied asylum seeker children, and that's statutory age. So again, I don't have the exact ages of those students just yet, but we do have those students in county, and it looks like that those numbers will continue to rise moving forward. We have again a small proportion of learners with criminal records, where these are the sort of conversations I've been having since being in post around, you know, what is in place for this student who's in county. English is they can't speak English very well, but they're struggling in their provision, and they're in year 10. They're on track to fail 11 GCSEs, you know, and it's that question around, well, what can we do to ensure that there's something meaningful and purposeful put in place to help this young person get on the right pathway in this country. So it was a really good. It made for some really good conversations with senior leaders and some challenging conversations, but it was a you know, I'm pleased to see that some of the schools have actually made some changes since this, and at least it's brought it to their attention in a clearer way, which is what we hope for. And again, the attendance I wanted to reference there for year 10 and 11 is around 87%. This is all based off the teacher-centred data. We will be having the PLAS data come through hopefully very soon, which we'll be able to reference as opposed to the teacher-centred data. So more specifically for these groups of learners, what came out, one of the main points which came out was, you know, that we do have a low amount of learners being entered for entry-level qualifications or level 1 qualifications. And when asked, when I asked schools, well, what is the, you know, 100% of the cohort are all doing maths GCSE. You've got no one being entered for entry-level maths. You know, that as an ex-head of maths, there's, you know, proportionally there will always be, you'd expect a small proportion of the learners to be accessing some level or level 1 or entry level qualifications. So yeah, it was interesting to find that there's no sort of strategy in place for identifying those learners earlier on. It was more done on a case-by-case basis when it was clear that you know, progress or engagement wasn't quite right, and that was something I thought which was worth noting in the report. And this poses a challenge for learners, because if they're in halfway through year 10 or even in some cases year 11 and they're on track to basically fail, and then at the last minute they're switching, I was asking the question, or I'm asking the question here, you know, is it better to actually try and identify those learners earlier on and put them onto the appropriate qualifications from the beginning, to avoid trying to switch halfway through? And that's the same for teachers having to adjust mid-qualification. Schools do, you know, most of the schools do operate, you know, intervention programs which look at a combination of the academic support with the emotional well-being, and they call it ELSA support, the emotional literacy support assistance, which is great. That provision is in county, and I was at an event today in the pavilion speaking to young people around sustainable prowess and asking them the question about, you know, do they feel supported in their schools? And a lot of schools do. However, there are limitations to this, and we know, again, this links back to the funding point, which has been raised already today. But many of these interventions aren't run by, you know, specific staff. It's generally sometimes a support worker, a support staff, or cover supervisors, and also that where we do have more specialist provision in certain centres, which is fantastic, that to deal with more complex needs. When asked, well, is there a pathway for those learners? Is there a meaningful qualification at the end of this provision? That wasn't always the case, which is where I've sort of said that these pathways are less defined. It's more of a base where they can access wellbeing support and come out of their lessons to be supported in that way. However, in the most effective approaches, so again, this is highlighting a real strength, that one or two of our schools operate really effective pathway options, whereby they identify learners and their options of subjects are adapted based on what pathway they're on. This is really well communicated with parents, the students, the staff, and done early enough to actually mean that the students are fully informed and the parents are on board. And yeah, the feedback from the students was fantastic, that they fully understand it, and they actually appreciate that triple science is only available if you're a pathway 1 learner, and I did ask the question around, does that cause any, if I was told I couldn't do this subject, would that actually frustrate me? But the way they handle it and include the parents in that they know that they base it off what they know about the students and the data, and they bring the families with them. It's done in a much better way. So it's actually really an example of effective practice, I'd say. On a more specific note of students requiring an alternative pathway, an alternative curriculum, the question I asked the conclusion from the answers I've got was that the options for these learners are limited. We do know that obviously it's really important that learners take different pathways after education, and it takes different types of qualifications to get them there. We know GCSEs are important. However, there are other qualifications which can be meaningful and help students move forward with their lives. And again, I wanted to be really clear here that this isn't to say that vulnerable groups cannot access or be successful on GCSEs or your triple sciences. That's definitely not to say that, or those types of qualifications. And equally, it isn't to say that learners who aren't from vulnerable backgrounds or non-FSM or whatever, that they wouldn't also want to access alternative vocational pathways. It was just, it's trying to really drive home the point that, more work needs to be done to ensure we have a more broader and balanced curriculum offer, and that everybody wins in that scenario. That's the sort of angle I've come at it from, is that with the 204 exclusions across year 10 and 11 for the year to date, having a broader and more balanced choice of qualifications for learners to access is helping create that positive environment, and you want you want learners to engage, and yeah, they'll potentially reduce exclusions. I'm not saying that's the magic formula to fix that. It's just that's a proven fact, that if you have those alternatives, instead of just them soldiering on with history, which they've missed all the coursework deadlines, they've already fallen behind. It's intervening early enough in their curriculum design so you don't get to that point where they're just leaving school with a U grade. You've actually looked at trying to put something in place, a safety net, to ensure that they're able to try and get into employment or further training following post 14 qualifications. So again, making the point there about that everyone would benefit from a broader and balanced provision in the mainstream. Again, but it is particularly true for the vulnerable groups. It's important to note that additional pressure is put on the system because of the level of support that we provide, but also the schools provide. There is a pressure in the system as a result of this. Some of the current strategies being employed when asked around the more extreme cases of behaviour and emotional support, which students are demonstrating in schools. The strategies most commonly given as responses were reduce their timetable, arrange for them to get out of school and do some work in the community somewhere, which is, again, this isn't dismissing these strategies. It's just that these are the 3 big ones, or engage with a non-profit or outreach somewhere, which again, these are effective strategies. It's just the point of, if the curriculum could be altered for those students before getting to that point, I would argue that's a it's more of a win trying to keep them in the school environment and giving them a taste of success and motivated in the school environment before having to pursue something like a reduced timetable or work placement. So, and again, with the aftermath of the pandemic, as again, I've only recently left the classroom myself, it is difficult at the moment. We are seeing an increase in managing more learners with behaviour challenges, and it doesn't look like this is going. My wife teaches reception, and there's 4 and 5-year-olds who still can't speak, and I'm potty trained, and we're going to see this for a long time. The tail end of the COVID pandemic is not going to disappear for any time soon. So looking at our curriculum design is something that we can actually do to help. And the last few points on the vulnerable groups is, I do link this to the post-16. I was keen to, obviously, at some point, the work I'm doing with Georgie and Councillor Selby on the post-16 in county. We do know a lot of learners are leaving. There's vocational colleges in county. We've got competition from across the border. It was very clear speaking to the head teachers of the ALN settings that there isn't really much for them to offer within the post-16 offer, and it is clear that if we actually get our post-14 pathways more clearly defined, linked to what the learners want to do, this should actually help us with retention and actually a more inclusive curriculum, and that should be a cornerstone of our curriculum offer. Was there any questions at that point? Okay.
I don't see any, Chris. Thank you, though.
That's okay.
Very interesting.
Let me know if I'm falling behind on time. Sorry, I'll keep going.
Yeah.
Provision for the specialist school. So on that point of what we can do for the ALN students, going to visit the ALN settings was actually was fantastic. I've been a few times now for other reasons as well, but it was always very welcomed to our special schools and love visiting and meeting with their learners. But as you'd probably expect, that our 3 specialist schools actually have a much more fluid design to their curriculum, and they're very, very good at meeting the very complex needs which they have to cater for, and it's something I actually think our mainstream settings could learn from in that context. Is how you build qualifications around the learner. This is, again, you've got the particular focus with the PRU of the aim of getting them back into a mainstream setting. So again, their approach is slightly different. They do have their vocational menu of offer of courses, but they do still go get them through their core subjects of maths, GCSEs, and English and science. But yeah, there's a huge range of qualifications on offer within the specialist centres, from the BTECs to ASDAN awards or GOREDs, and in addition to the core GCSEs and the from the life skills of time. Reading the timetable to going out shopping and handling money. They're very good at trying to give their learners really meaningful and purposeful skills which move them on. I'm really pleased as well with the work going on with the colleges at the moment. It seems like things have really actually picked up again now with again, I'm able to sort of link together when Ysgol Cadwyn tell me that they don't really have an idea of what goes on at the college at Newtown. I've been able to arrange for the teachers to go up to Newtown now and actually meet the staff, look at the provision themselves, and that better informs them when they're speaking to parents and young people about what's appropriate for the next stages for their learners. So really pleased to see Anang Harrid and is doing loads of work with Brecon College as well. So there's Penmice and Brecon. It's really pleasing to see that provision is starting up again.
Chris, it strikes me, sorry to interrupt, that it might be useful sometime to have a session for members on some of these newer courses that I'm certainly aware that I don't know very much about what some of them entail.
Not many school staff will either, and that's not to be disparaging to school staff. This is literally, I'm be more than happy to do that. So we have this new suite, this new menu of options. This is how the vision for qualifications in Wales will look. And as we said at the start, the GCSEs, the Made for Wales GCSEs, is where they started, and the consultations that's been going on for a long time, and now they're shifting their focus onto this next layer of the pre-vocational and skill suite qualifications coming in from September 27. So again, they might not, it might not look exactly like this in September 27, but you can see the trajectory we're on, that this isn't going to go anywhere. We in some way, shape or form, we need to be looking at how these are going to look. And I found this in this is taken straight from the decisions report from Welsh Gov, from the Qualification Wales report from January. And I think this actually really highlights how, the fact that we've got vocational, the VCSEs now, and the way they've positioned them alongside the GCSEs is trying to get rid of the old adage, the golden pathway of GCSE A-level degree. It's really trying to put this emphasis on the skills in the economy which we need, the vocational pathways, which are truly viable pathways for our learners, and we want to try and elevate them up on par with the GCSE. So I really like that from this this menu which have been offered. But as you can see, there's a lot of changes here with the coming in with the skills for life and skills for work award. So again, we can maybe come back to this another time if we're short on time today. But I've put in a little overview of how these what's coming from these qualifications. So again, these are the VCSEs for when they're level 1 or 2. They'll be referred to as foundation for level 1 and entry level. So that there's some fantastic qualifications there. Obviously, schools will struggle to deliver a lot of those. So again, this is where that complexity. We know that what the vision is for these qualifications. It's now we need to start thinking about, well, how are we going to possibly deliver these or more of these in a school setting, particularly for a school which doesn't live across the road from a technical college like some of our schools are very close to.
Yeah.
Bryn, do you want to?
Yeah, Bryn, do you know?
Okay, diolch. Gan bod ni wedi symud ymlaen i cymwysterau ac yn y blaen, just cyn mynd rhy bell. Ddarech chi edrych o gwbl i mewn i darpariaeth ar gyfer mwyabol a thalentog. Dio ddim yn term dwi'n hoff ohono fo, ond mi roedd yna disgwyliad tan yn ddiweddar bod ysgolion yn darparu rhyw ddarpariaeth ar gyfer mwyabol a thalentog. Ydy hwnna dal i fod yn rhyw fath o ar y rhestr o pethau mae ysgolion gorau gwneud?
I did ask the question around provision for more able and talented. Generally speaking, the most common answer was the SEREN program is just started up again, that they're engaging with the SEREN program. That was the main sort of response. In terms of actual links to qualifications, I was surprised as an ex-head of maths that there wasn't more taking up the level 2 additional maths qualification. That's usually a bridging unit to the A level and further mathematics A levels. So there wasn't as many taking up the additional maths course. But in terms of qualifications, you've got the triple science as well, which we discussed. I could get those figures for you as well. But math, yeah. There's still more to be done on math, and again, in terms of how we measure the impact of these, the proportion of students. It's difficult with knowing what figures we can use, but it's a difficult one to measure. But what the schools told me was the SEREN program is their main sort of approach to stretching the more able and talented students.
Okay, so mae'n aros ar yr agenda felly fel rhywbeth mae ysgolion gorfod gwneud.
Definitely, yes.
Chris, I think you've touched on it already, but I know it was part of what Alid raised earlier. I think it's how it looks like a wonderful spread of curriculum and all sorts of interesting subjects. But how on earth do you provide that with equity seems to be the kind of in word at the moment. How can you be equitable to students across the county and provide that wide range of subjects, both from a financial point of view and actually having the staff to be able to teach that range of subjects?
It's an incredible challenge, and it couldn't be coming at a worse time with budgets as they are, and that's the shame here. You think if this came when times were a bit better, perhaps that'd be great, but at this point it is, and this is why I want to highlight in the report that we need to start thinking now. basically on how we do this. And again, they might not look exactly like this at the very end, and you wouldn't be schools won't be expected, I don't imagine, they wouldn't be able to deliver all of these courses. There's going to be some sort of compromise perhaps between the vision and what we can feasibly deliver. However, there's no harm, it doesn't do any harm trying to actually be aspirational and think and be innovative around how we can widen our curriculum and make it more broader and balanced in that sense. But yeah, it's that you are totally correct. It is going to be a challenge.
But this, so this has come from the Welsh Government, Chris, is
yes.
that right? So it's Welsh
Yes.
Government. So yeah, so it will depend on how far they're prepared to push in terms of saying that has got to be delivered, or it's up to individuals how you deliver it.
Yeah, and it would, there's the skills for life and the work qualifications. There's some really fantastic. These aren't as vocational or heavy vocational ones. These are more like, how do you apply for a job? Online safety. Democracy in action. It's getting, there's some really good informative smaller units of work. So I really like where they're going with it. It's just, you are right though. It's what it will actually look like at the very end. We're not quite sure, but there's starting to plan. We can see that the trajectory is going to get close to something like this. So that would be my advice, is that we start asking schools to think about how they can deliver these sorts of awards. So yeah, these slides were mainly just to give everyone here just a bit of a snippet of what the decisions report states. Same with the foundation qualifications. There's going to be linked to the areas of learning. It's a lot of information, I'm aware. I can share the link to the actual report following this if you prefer, so you can just read the full document. There is a lot of information there, but it is really important, I think, to see what the vision for qualifications look like for Wales moving forward. So I called it a recommendation, but the point one I wanted to raise was, we need to ensure our schools are offering a broad and balanced and inclusive range of qualifications, particularly around the availability to learners, helping them progress into post-16, whatever that may be. If it's a sixth form, if it's the college, if it's to work-based employment, work-based training, and whatever it is, those qualifications need to help move learners forward and be prepared for that, particularly our ALN and vulnerable. I'll just plough ahead with the Welsh medium. Again, I know I'm taking a long time, so apologies. We have our Welsh in Education Strategic Plan, our WESP, to have more learners studying for Welsh qualifications, both as a subject and subject to the medium of Welsh. Like I said, I met with Beth Price to go through this, to make sure this sort of lined up with some of the data she's been collecting and collating for the WESP. And yeah, again, it was an interesting process to go through. We can clearly see that there's the numbers of learners on some of these courses it's just something to monitor perhaps, and when speaking to schools on this, it was interesting to see how I'm not going to name schools at this point. It's just, when you bring all this data together, when we consider where we are, we've still got a lot of work to do in terms of Welsh medium provision and improving that. So you can see an overview there of the post-14, the options. Oh, no, sorry, not the options. These are just the actual courses available. There, which I think Welsh Lit isn't on our list right now, actually, but it was on the other list, wasn't it? Go on. Sorry,
No,
I know there's going to be some questions. Oh, it is there. There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bryn.
Okay, diolch. Pam bod y rhifau yma yn cynnwys bobl sydd ar cyrsiau derbyn y cymwysterau yma trwy gyfrwng Cymraeg neu yn ddwyieithog? Achos unai fysach chi gallu cynnwys heina yn y rhifau Saesneg, y rhaid sy'n ddwyieithog, neu o leia rhannu pa cyrsiau sy'n cael ei derbyn yn ddwyieithog oddi wrth y rai sy'n cael ei derbyn trwy cyfrwng Cymraeg, achos mae'n amrywiaeth mawr yn natur y gwersi ddwyieithog. Mae'n amlwg, mae'n dibynnu lle mae'n cael ei darparu, ond dydyn nhw ddim yn cael y profiad addysg cyfrwng Cymraeg mewn dosbarthiadau dwyieithog ar y cyfan. Mae'r gwersi yn Saesneg ac weithiau mae'r athro wedi trafferthu. Mae'n gallu paratoi rhai adnoddau yn Gymraeg. Ond dyn nhw ddim i gyd felly, ond mae sawl un fel hynny, ac a Saesneg ydy natur y drafodaeth yn anochel, achos mae yna rhaid i Gymraeg yn yr un dosbarth. Fel sy'n digwydd heddiw, enghraifft. So, dwi'n meddwl yn glir dylai bod nhw'n cael eu gwahanu yn yr ystadegau. Rhai sy'n cael eu dilifro'n ddwyieithog ar wahan i'r rhaid Cymraeg. Ar sylw cyffredinol arall, dyma'r yr unig daflen ar gyfer addysg cyfrwng Cymraeg. Dwi'n meddwl, mae'n edrych fel tasau y Gymraeg yn cael ei edrych ar ei hôl, ac edrych ar ei hôl, dyna'r argraff os y bobl yn cael o'r tu allan ac yn y blaen. I fod yn deg, dylai pob un taflen arall yn y cyflwyniad, sy'n ardderchog, dwi'n cwyno am y cyflwyniad, mae'n dda iawn, ond bydde fo'n, i fod yn deg, dylai fod dweud English provision for vulnerable groups, English provision for specialist schools and pupil and referral units, English provision for ar pob un arall, achos mae pobl, pan ydych chi'n ymgyrchu dros gwelliannau, wel, mae'n rhyfeddol faint o weithiau mae bobl yn dod fyny, pan bod ni'n gwario'r holl bres mae'r addysg gyfrwng Cymraeg. Y realaeth ydy bod ffracsiwn bach iawn o wariant addysg Powys sy'n cael ei wario ar gyfer addysg cyfrwng Cymraeg. Just i nhw cael syniad o'r cyfran sydd yn Saesneg a gyfran yn Gymraeg, fysa pob cyfeiriad arall ar addysg, os dyn ni'n cyfeirio addysg cyfrwng Cymraeg fel addysg cyfrwng Cymraeg, dylai fod yn addysg a deilliannau dwyieithog, ond dylai bod nhw'n addysg cyfrwng Saesneg ar pob un o'r slides eraill. So hwnna a rhannu'r data ar pwy sy'n derbyn o'n ddwyieithog a pwy sy'n derbyn o'n Gymraeg ydy'r dau pwynt dwi'n gwneud.
Yeah, it is, and I will say when the data, it's not as clear cut as you when you ask the schools, you do have a lot of courses where they're like, well, it is biology, it's bioleg, but actually there's, and or they transfer them, or the double we do through the medium of Welsh. The triple is English only. It gets really confusing with how we unpick this, and I'm more than happy to look at a better way of capturing this data, Councillor Bryn, to get what we need. This is prior to this, I couldn't tell you anything about Welsh medium numbers, so this is I'm definitely happy to move forward on that. Okay.
Dwi'n gwerthfawrogi hynny. Mae'n cychwyn da iawn, ond dwi yn teimlo bod arweinwyr mewn ysgolion yn cymryd y cyfle i guddio cynlliad maen nhw'n gwneud ar gyfer y cyfrwng Cymraeg, i fod yn onest.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, diolch. I'm very aware I've taken a long time, so I'll really try and speed things up now. So yes, it is around that imbalance, and that carries through into the post-16, I feel as well, we got the 13% of the offer is, again, between that bilingual or Welsh medium, the small class sizes, it's a real challenge. It needs to improve. So improving the Welsh medium provision and the offer to enable more learners to access the qualifications, but also through Welsh medium education for pupils with additional learning needs. So again, if there's any other questions, I'm happy to take it, but moving forward, happy to move forward at this point if everyone else is.
Okay, any questions? No, crack on, Chris. That's
okay.
Great, thank you.
Flying through now, the careers advice, this does link more to the speaking to the students and the interviews I conducted with them. So asking them what was on offer. It generally boils down to a Careers Wales representative in the school. That was what the bulk of the 11s were telling us and the 10s were saying. Worryingly, some of them still hadn't even met their Careers Wales advisors. And again, that's not casting aspersions on Careers Wales or the schools. It's just stating the facts. This is what the young people were telling me. There in a few schools there are a regular diet of things going on from year 7 upwards, from assemblies and workshops, but the overwhelming consensus was that they are keen for more guidance and more input. The careers fairs was an interesting one. Yes, they'd all attended one, but the impact of that was debatable. They said it was useful if you knew, but if the ones who weren't sure didn't find it as useful. What they actually really made clear was they find it really useful meeting with people from a range of industries, and sometimes from industries they might not have considered, having a real breadth of input into their advice and guidance at an earlier stage. They found really informative and useful when considering their pathways. And again, but a lot of them were talking about apprenticeships and those vocational pathways. They're not getting as much airtime as the college, what's available through the sixth form, in terms of future pathways. So that's something we need to sort of address moving forward, ensuring that they're getting a real honest options laid out in front of them, and the students are wanting that. So I was really keen to link this to the labour market intelligence we have for Mid Wales. So thankfully, I was able to get this from MZ via the Mid Wales Regional Skills Partnership. They gave us some data here on everyone in this room might already be aware of some of this, but I thought this was interesting, and I definitely think that with the careers and work related experiences which students should be experiencing in school, it has to tie into and be informed by the data. I think if it's going to really have an impact on the local economy and the local business needs, we know where our biggest growth sectors are. We know where our future business skills, what they're asking for. We have that data. I've left some bits off this screen, but we need to try and tie the two need to be better aligned. Employers keep telling me they're desperate to get in and work with students, or where's the next pipeline of employees coming from, and schools are desperate to try and arrange for these work-related experiences. So there's still a lot of work to be done on careers and work-related experiences in schools, and that was very evident from speaking to the learners. So that's another point raised there, just to ensure that they're prepared for their post 14 and 16 options. Moving on. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
So this one's an easier one to go through. There was around the options processes students were going through. It generally boiled down to a parental information evening, a taster session, a straw poll, like a vote for what they want to do, and then having to make their decisions. Interesting that the parental information evenings were deemed useful, but it was the taster sessions. That's what the students really want to do, is actually get in with more time and speak to their students, to the heads of departments and subjects, to find out what they're going to be getting in for. There was a lot of the students, quite clear that this wasn't what they signed up for. They weren't quite aware of how much numeracy skills are in a geography GCSE. And there's a bit of a mistrust there then around, it's not what I was sold, and they're very keen to try and improve that. So the taster sessions were deemed to be very useful, and would like more. We know post-COVID it's hard to get attendance up to a real optimum level for parents and carers to these parental information evenings, but there were one or two schools who operate in a very different way, and they've been very creative with the way they organise their curriculum to offer more subjects. So again, I didn't go into more detail on this screen because it would be too much detail to try and condense, but there's definitely some practice which other schools I think would benefit from hearing about in terms of how they arrange their option blocks, and to try and widen and strengthen their curriculum offer, which was a real strength from going out and actually speaking to senior leaders about this. So again, that the recommendation there was to ensure that the options processes and experiences, that there's more to focus on taster sessions, but again linked to career pathways, better guidance, so that learners can make more of an informed option going forward. Any points there before I get onto the last? No? Okay.
We're clear to go. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. thankfully Cressy and Eirig have already gone over a lot of this. So then there was a repetition of data here. You'll see again, this is the publicly available stuff. There was some other data shared in the first version of this, which I don't think I was meant to have shared. So apologies there. But as yourselves have said, we need to know how things are going, and looking at the data, it's a really key part of reviewing where we're at, and we need, and understanding that. So again, there's a little overview of the CAP 9. Cressy did a fantastic job of explaining it, so we won't need that now. And again, looking at it over a period of time is difficult because you have the COVID years there, but our average CAP 9 score for the Powys County, it is coming back down. That does mirror the national trend with COVID going back to pre-COVID levels. We're sort of halfway between the 22 and the 19 outcomes. Well, we're bang on actually. the halfway between those two outcome points. But again, it is important to look at this, and everyone's made those points around the family of data, which is true. We do need to keep that context in the question to look at, which feeds into this debate. Again, you have the literacy, numeracy, science, and the only one bucking the trend is the Welsh Back Skills Challenge certificate. That's gone up to 39, gone up 1 point. But I've left the points alongside again because it is confusing. We were saying this is a new language for us in education. It'll be the same for everyone in this meeting as well. What does an average point score of 41 mean? What does an average CAP 9 score of 300 and something mean? This is how we need to talk about school improvement going forward. So again, you've got those figures there. Again, the downward trajectory, but this mirrors national trends. My point in this would be that based on the makeup of our students, using the family of schools as a benchmarking tool is what we need to do. So we're not just comparing us against the All Wales data, looking at how each school is performing against it within its family, which is the work Cressy and her team are looking at. But I do think we need to be aspirational. I don't think we're not dealing with the level of FSM, the level of deprivation, the level on all measures. We do have it in county, and it is important to not acknowledge that, as we've already done. But I do think, and this is Georgie referenced the ALPS data, and it's about aspiring and lifting expectations of teaching and learning. And I have seen it. A bit of the work I've done with Cressy's team is going and working on the cluster insets. There is a bit of a culture which needs, and which this is what the work needs to continue with, trying to raise those levels of teaching and learning, and that will be the biggest driver for raising standards at both post 14 and post 16 is aspiring and not just accepting being middle of the pack, and aiming to be in that top 25% when compared to their family of schools. So that's the whistle stop tour. I'm again happy to take any other questions.
Thank you, Chris. That was a really thorough presentation and lots of information. So I'm sure that we will have questions in the future when we've had a chance to think about it and digest it a bit more, and we'll perhaps need to ask you to come back and give us, well, I guess things will move on quite quickly anyway as you develop the curriculum.
Happy to come back anytime.
Thank you. Georgie, is there anything that you want to add?
Just to say a big thank you really to Chris. It was a really comprehensive piece of work, and a big thank you to the schools. They worked really well with Chris on just trying to help us establish the current state of play, if you like, and the pictures there. And it's really given us that opportunity to identify those next steps around that progression, particularly from 14-16 qualifications into the post 16 as well, and how we as an LA evolve in line with that demand. As I said it previously, there is a need to have a broader offer, and how do we do that, and how do we do that within our current restraints as well, and explore opportunities there, because some schools do share in other regions around having set timetables, etc. to try and broaden that offer in some way. So there is national training happening, just to reassure everybody around the qualifications. You know, Chris is organising those inset, Chris Davis, not Chris James, and Chrissy's team, etc., being part of that training so that we can support our teachers within Powys to upskill in line with those potential VCSEs as well. So just to make you aware that that training is being planned for as well.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Georgie. Aled.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation as well. Huge amount of information there. It's about delivery, which is the key. As you look around the schools, the secondary phase, what level of number of options do they vary much between schools? How much choice there is? I know some schools may go that extra mile and dependent on teacher about delivery outside the timetable as well. But generally speaking, across the school estate, how many options do children have at that key stage before going forward? And also, what is the average cohort you need within a school or class size, really, on average, to provide that have that provision within that school? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. No, it's the viability question, I think, is what you're saying there, isn't it? Around if you've got, you know, it would be fantastic to offer everything to everyone, but like with it, we've already sort of touched on the budgets of having a group of 3 students interested in Mandarin, and it's fantastic that that's an option. But in answer to your first question around the average, I have the data just off screen here. Again, eyeballing it without putting it into a spreadsheet and actually working out the average. You know, we've got a range from schools offering one sort of qualification to our best, the sort of widest offer being around 6 subjects outside of GCSEs, that is. So that 7, sorry, in one of our schools. So there's a big range, but it's still quite low in that sense. And there are more than one school with only sort of one extra subject, but they also might be the schools who are actually linking quite well with the college. So that sort of counteracts those in that sense. You know, it's tricky to get a full average, if you like. But I can if you want to send me any questions following this, I'm happy to sort of go away and crunch those numbers more accurately for you.
Okay, no, there are comments coming from learners, the limited, well, basically they talk about number of columns they have, and that's quite limiting in many other schools across Powys. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, if there's no other questions, thank you. We just need to move on to item 9, which is the work programme. I don't know whether anybody has any comments on that or wants to add anything. I think we do have a meeting tomorrow just to update the work programme. So it's an ideal opportunity if anybody does have any suggestions. But I think we've covered it fairly recently, so there may be nothing more to add at this stage. Any thoughts on that? No. Okay. Well, thank you all very much. That's been a really useful meeting, I think, very informative. I'd like to thank all the officers for their attendance and of course for the county councillors. And if I can ask the county councillors just to hold on for a quick 5-minute debrief, then that would be really helpful. Thank you very much.